Hello, so Andy here again from Home Glow. So I have actually got my work t-shirt on for real. I don't know what I pointed to then. I have got my work t-shirt on for real today. I've actually been out to do a job. Woo! Only essential jobs though. That's what I'm definitely trying to do at the moment. Is I will only go out to boilers that are all off, leaking, water coming through ceiling. So anyway, that's one of the jobs I've been to today. And the job I went to today was, I suppose, quite a common fault. So I thought I'll do a bit of a video on this and stuff you can do yourself to try and save yourself a bob or two. So situation where it's a combination boiler, and is this last probably 2 weeks he's been having to top the boiler up every single day, every morning. He's been going into the garage. Boiler's not where it's gone into the garage. It's an alpha boiler and it's flashing up low pressure. So this will be for any boiler, not just an alpha boiler. When a pressure gauge on a boiler, on a combi boiler, generally, if it drops below 0.5 of a bar, some pressure gauges don't have numbers on, they have like a colour scale, which is a bit rubbish. But basically, boiler hasn't worked. You're going out to boiler and there's a fault code flashing. It'll either say it in words like on an Ideal Logic does, or it'll come up with a code. On an alpha, it works on flashing lights, A and B flashing. So, anyway, it is, I'm going off again a bit sidetracked. He's gone out to, every day, he's having to go out to boiler, top it up. So, things you can do yourself for this particular problem is, in my opinion, let's make it just dead easy to try and understand why you're going to be losing pressure. So you're going to be losing pressure on your central heating system, which I would class as your radiators and your pipework. So just forget about your boiler for the time being. So your radiators and your pipework, radiator valves, and obviously you've got your pipework under floorboards. But that is a nasty job, that, to try and find a leak on. So we'll just concentrate on radiators, valves, and everything associated with what you can see. The other place you can be losing pressure is on your actual boiler itself. So then you would check around wherever your boiler is situated. For example, mine's in airing cupboard in loft. Go inside there. I would check the floorboards underneath the boiler just to see if I can see any water stains. Have a look underneath the boiler. See if you can see any obvious signs of any water leaks on any pipework. So that's what I would do first. Just have a good look round your boiler, underneath, around all the pipework that's coming from the boiler, so underside of the boiler. Have a good feel around there. Is there wet? Can you feel anything? So anyway, you've checked that, everything's bone dry. So then what I would do is move on to the next stage. Every single radiator will have radiator valves in it. So it'll be painstaking to do, but go around all your radiator valves. Have a good feel around them. Don't just have a look at it and think, oh, that's not leaking. Feel with your finger, feel with some tissue paper, because tissue is good for showing up a leak, because obviously you might not feel it for whatever reason. You might not feel the water going on your finger, whereas a piece of tissue, obviously you're going to see water straight away on that. It's going to soak straight in. So have a good look round those radiator valves. Take off the cap of the radiator valve. Look underneath the cap of the radiator valve, because sometimes they can be leaking underneath there, where the gland of the valve, where the stem's sticking out, what you turn for the radiator valve, that can be leaking from there. That's a very common place for something to be leaking. Thermostatic radiator valves, check around those. Don't just check your radiator valves, check around your bleed, where you would normally bleed a radiator. Check around the valve where it screws into the radiator. Check all around there. The other side of the radiator, you'll have a blank. So definitely check the blank, see whether that's leaking. Underneath the radiator, again, just have a feel. Run your hand underneath the rim of the radiator. Have a feel along there. Have a good check of your radiators. And I would say that is a common place for leaks to be found. So yeah, I know that if it's obviously on a leak on a radiator, if it's the radiator itself, you still need to get us out to come and do it, and you're going to have to incur a call out for that, unfortunately. But at least you know where the leak is, so you've saved yourself time. That's what I'm trying to get at. So all I'm trying to teach you is just how to save time on a call out when a plumber comes out. So anyway, you've checked everything else on the radiators, the pipework, everything that you can see. Everything's bone dry. So we've checked the boiler, we've checked the radiators. and everything's bone dry. Another suggestion what I can do suggest for you is when you've topped your boiler up again for umpteenth time and you put pressure into it, probably about 1.5 bar, set your heating going. Just set your heating going, and after about half an hour, go back to that boiler and check your gauge. So what you're going to do first is top your pressure back up on your boiler when everything's cold, and we'll, for example, we'll just use a rule of thumb that you set it to 1 bar. So out between 1 and 1.5 bar, perfect. So we've set it at 1 bar. Go away from your boiler, put your heating on, just let it work away for about half an hour. Then go back to that boiler and check your pressure gauge. Now, on any pressure gauge, it is normal for that pressure to have rose from 1 bar once it's been on for an hour or two. So that's called expansion. Obviously, when water heats up, all the molecules start getting right excited inside water and they expand in mass. So that's what you're checking. So if it's gone up to from about 1 bar to 1.5 bar, that is fine. Now, this is where it gets a bit more complicated. On a pressure gauge, it goes up into numbers, or if it's on a colour scale, you'll probably see a little red blob of colour on the bottom of the scale, then it'll turn to grey, and then it'll probably go to red again. If you're working on numbers, it'll go from 0 all the way up to probably 5, so 5 bar. So check that pressure gauge. So it is normal for the pressure to rise from 1 to 1.5 bar, let's say, once that boiler's been on for an hour or so. That's called expansion. What's not normal is if you're in an hour or so, that pressure gauge has gone from 1 to 2.5 or even further and gone over 3.5 bar. Because then what happens, within that boiler, the boiler has got something called a pressure relief valve. Now the pressure relief valve, all it is, it's a fail-safe. So what that fail-safe does is once the pressure reaches a maximum of like 3.5 bar, it's a spring governed valve, and that's all that it is. It'll just discharge the water. So something else to check as well, which I have neglected, is check outside, and you should have a little piece of copper pipe that's just literally poking out at the wall and just left dangling. And I bet you've wondered, what's that for? What's that plumber left out on my boiler for? That is the discharge pipes. That's where the water will come from the valve to the outside. Have a look, see if you can see any stains on your wall where it's been previously running. And also, if we're into the diagnostic stage anyway now, aren't we? We're checking the pressure. If it has gone to 3 bar, have a look outside, and there's a very good chance that that pipe that's poking out the wall is dripping. So, if that's dripping, you are, in theory, well, you are definitely, not in theory, definitely, that boiler will then, in turn, lose water pressure. So, because there's expansion there at the moment, your boiler will be working tickety-boo, it'll be working fine. And because of the expansion within the water, the boiler will carry on working. When you'll find that it doesn't work properly is the next day again, or when your heating turns off, because all of that residual expansion that is there from the heat, the boiler turns off, so then that boiler loses all that heat, all the molecules start moving around and creating expansion. So then you'll find that your pressure gauge drops like a brick, goes back down to 0. And the other thing that you've got inside that boiler is a pressure switch. So what the pressure switch does is another fail-safe. If it drops below like 0.5 or 0.7 of a bar, your boiler will detect this pressure loss. The pressure switch will activate, causing that boiler to go to that fault of low pressure in your boiler. So just remember, 2 places you can lose pressure. One is your heating system, your radiators and your pipework. The other place you're going to be losing pressure is on the actual boiler itself. So again, if the pipe's dripping outside, there's not going to be nothing you can do, is because obviously for you to be able to work on that boiler, you've got to be gas safe registered. So don't do it. Don't even risk it. Even if you know full well what I've told you, is this is the reason why you're losing pressure. then what you need to do, call a plumber, but at least, again, you've saved time for that plumber to be able to come out and diagnose it. You've just made it a quick process, so you're not going to incur lots of time getting to this stage. So that's all that this video is about. It's just a basic tutorial on how you can try and diagnose where the actual water is being lost. If it's not on any of those things, that piping dripping outside and then pressure gauge for whatever reason is fine, then unfortunately your leak is probably going to be on some pipe work that's hidden. You can't see. It's under floorboards, in wall, awfully not, but under tiled floors or something like that. So then what else you could do is look at your ceiling. If it's leaking upstairs, have a look at your ceiling, see if you can see any brown patches or anything like that. If you can, that's somewhere else you could have a look, lift up floorboards around that area and just see if you can see any obvious signs of any leaks. So I hope this has been educational. So if you have got this problem, it is a very basic thing what I'm telling you to do, but all I'm doing is you can't, like I said, it's not something you can. I mean, it might be a case that if your radiator valve is leaking, you feel you're comfortable enough to tighten up a nut on a radiator valve. Then you've just saved yourself a complete call out there. So just have a good look, around the pipe work and everything else, and see what you can see. So again, guys, thanks for watching. I will do another more in-depth video on this procedure for probably plumbers that are new to the industry and what you can do to solve this problem, because it will be something associated with something called an expansion vessel. So I'll show you an easy task that you can literally, this is for plumbers only who are gas safe registered, who can enter that boiler and legally work on that boiler, and I'll show you how to literally pump up the expansion vessel. So again, thanks for watching. See you soon. Look after yourself.